So I am so pleased to be able to introduce our next presenter, who is Laurence Newey, Vice President of Lucis Trust. And Laurence is an amazing person who has understanding not only of deep esotericism, but also some of the highest science. So he is able to bridge these two together, which really is what needs to happen in the world today, where more esotericism comes into science to reveal what is real. His topic today is going to be on electric body, electric universe. So as you know, we're in the period now coming up of three festivals, and Laurence is a little busy and he couldn't come in from London, although we've been blessed with Steve Nation and Kathy Newburn. So not to be daunted, because I knew he would be so perfect for us today to hear from him, we filmed his talk ahead of time. So we will be showing you his talk on this topic, and then we will have 15 minutes of live Q&A where you can ask your questions directly of Laurence, and he can be with us then. So please join me in welcoming Laurence Newey, Electric Body, Electric Universe.
Well, good day to you all at the Seven Ray Institute and the University of Seven Rays. It's a great privilege to join you and offer some thoughts to one of my favourite topics, electricity. I've been asked to talk on the subject of electric body, electric universe, and let's hope that this does add some kind of stimulant to your discussions afterwards. So in dealing with electricity, anything to do with electricity, we really have to start right at the beginning and ask ourselves, what is the most fundamental understanding we have of this mysterious fluid? What is the attractive force between a positively charged object and a negatively charged one? What is the attractive force between a proton and an electron in the heart of the atom? Now, science knows how electric charge works and behaves well enough. It knows that electricity is a form of energy that's created by the motion of electrons. But it does seem at a loss to actually describe or understand what electricity is in essence. But then this is understandable because science, of course, doesn't realise that quite literally electricity is alive. It's a living entity. So from the esoteric perspective, we're familiar with the concept of that great electrical life, Fohat. And to paraphrase Helena Blavatsky, he is personified electric vital power, the transcendental binding unity of all cosmic energies, on the unseen as on the manifested planes. On the cosmic level, his influence is felt in the constructive power that carries out the plan in the mind of nature, in the formation of things, from the planetary system down to the glowworm and the simple daisy. On the earthly plane, his influence is felt in the magnetic force. He is the active force in universal life, the messenger of cosmic and human ideations. And on a lower scale, he is the objectivized thought of the gods, the Word made flesh. Elsewhere we read, Fohat, the swift son of the divine sons, runs circular errands. He passes like lightning through the fiery clouds, the cosmic mists, strides through the seven regions above and the seven below, the world to be. He lifts his voice and calls the innumerable sparks, the atoms, and joins them together. So, what a beautiful way of describing the ultimate, the primary electric circuit. In this scenario, everything in manifestation is part of one gigantic electric circuit, with myriads of smaller circuits existing within larger ones. Furthermore, wherever we have electricity, of course, we have magnetism. They are two manifestations of the same electromagnetic entity. Wherever there is an electric current, there is an accompanying magnetic field, and vice versa. And it is this relationship that forms the basics of the science of invocation and evocation. So to understand this, we can visualize a simple electric circuit to see how the invocation of a great life is taking place at a purely physical level in every electrified household, as surely as it is by a group of people coming together to participate in spiritual work through the ritual and ceremony of group invocation. So in a simple circuit such as a ring of copper wire with a battery and a light bulb inserted into it, the outer electrons in the atoms of copper that make up the wire are loosely bounded to one another, and they are pushed along the wire from atom to atom when the chemical energy of the battery is switched on. This is what we generally understand by the term an electric current. But this current doesn't supply any power of its own. For the current flow, the movement of the electrons along the wire is less than a centimetre per minute. And that's direct current, DC. In our homes we use AC, alternating current. And here the electrons, they don't flow around the circuit at all. They just vibrate. They jiggle or shuffle back and forth on the spot. So if the electric current moves forward so lethargically, or even not at all, what exactly is happening? Well, in fact, in the simple movement of the electrons, we're witnessing the basics of ceremony and ritual. This little electron dance or ceremony is, if you like, a seventh ray shuffle. For as the ageless wisdom tells us, the seventh ray works in connection with the phenomenon of electricity. And this rhythmic motion is part of the invocation rite of Fohat, who, invoked by the chemical reaction in the battery, sweeps through the circle of vibrating electrons to perform his electrifying work. In distinction to the little electron lives who make up the electric current, what we are actually seeing is the electromagnetic force field that does the work of lighting up our bulb. A great life has been invoked by the rhythmic cooperative motion of myriads of tiny little electronic lives. Fohat sweeps along the spaces around the wires that connect the battery to the bulb filament at close to the speed of light. Here he rushes into the electron elementals in the filament and stimulates them with his electrical energy. And this he does to the point that it's converted into light and heat, which then radiates out into the environment. So the parallels between this and ceremonial ritual are very interesting to consider if, for instance, we think about the preparations that are made at the Wesak festival each year. Prior to the appearance of the Buddha, attendees of every grade perform ritualistic movements to magnetize the ethers and build up the force of invocation to facilitate the Buddha's appearance and work. They weave in synchronized movement to form significant symbols, such as the five-pointed star, the triangle, and the cross. and all to the sound of certain chanted words and mantrams. The sense of expectancy grows, we're told, and the tension increases. And, to quote, through the entire body of people, there seems to be felt a stimulation of vibration, which fuses and blends the group into one united whole. Fohat has been invoked, and an aspect of his electrical power shoots through the gathering. Each attendee is acting both as a battery and as a light bulb, participating in the invocation rite of Fohat through ritualistic sound and through motion. And as the invoked electric charge pours into the centres of the attendees' bodies, it is converted into the light and the warmth of energetic moving out, to coin an esoteric phrase. Light and occult warmth radiate out into the environment, and in fact throughout the world. Now that the circuit is alive and functioning, the blessing of the Buddha can be carried through the group and flow into the world on waves of Fohatic energy. So, the human being is composed of the same essence that permeates the electron, the life of Fohat, or electricity. The blood, the nervous system, speech, the movement of our muscles, our ability to sense the world around us, all depends on electrical flow. All animals communicate, move about, and employ their five senses by means of electricity generated within their bodies. They depend on mechanisms that in turn depend on electricity. There is basically electricity in all things that move. The signals that carry commands from the brain through nerves, again, electrical, as are all the sensory signals that move from the body towards the brain. Cell division, heartbeat, all electrical in nature. In fact, all chemical changes are based on electricity, through electrons being transferred, shared, or altered at the molecular level. There are practically no non-electrical systems in the human body. Even when we lie down to rest, complex electrical duties continue to be performed, heartbeat, oxygen flowing into the lungs, and innumerable cellular activities. So the human body is an electrochemical system. The part of the body that depends on electricity the most being the nervous system, of course. Circulation, the immune system, motion, communication, digestion, excretion, all these functions take place thanks to the electrical nature of the nervous system. So, having taken a quick overview of the electrical nature of the body, we next have to consider the conductive medium through which it travels. That's metals. Now, metals provide the key to many mysteries of alchemy and transmutation. They are intrinsically linked to the faculties of man and his consciousness. In a treatise on cosmic fire, we read that the builders of the mineral kingdom are occultly called the elemental alchemists. They are in many groups connected with the differing elements, metals, chemicals and minerals, and with what are called active and radioactive substances. They are the custodians of two secrets, that of the metallization of the monad and the secret of the transmutation of metals. Now, to understand this, we have to go back to perhaps our long-forgotten high school education, the chemistry of our youth, and the surprising fact that, in actual fact, over 70–75% of all of the elements that make up the world are metals. And it is the metals that contain the essence of the eventual mental, emotional and spiritual faculties of man. So with reference to the secret doctrine, the essences that make up man and what he is and what he will eventually become, they begin as emanations from the 7 creative hierarchies. The 7 creative hierarchies of being, the spiritual rulers of the planets. These potencies differentiate into colours and their corresponding sounds. Sound then materialises into the spirit of the metals, the metallic elementals, and finally into the dense physical metals themselves, whereupon the upward arc of evolution begins. From the mineral kingdom, this harmonial and vibratory radiant essence is taken up by the plants, giving them colour and scent. From plants it passes into the animals, and finally it culminates in the principles of man, the intuition, higher and lower mind, the passions and instincts, and so forth. In the mineral kingdom, the metal gold is the purest demonstration of the light of these 7 creative hierarchies. And according to Rosicrucian alchemists, gold is the actual deposit of light, and equally light is sublimated gold, rescued magically by invisible stellar attraction out of material depths. Now in the celestial world, light is subtle, vaporous, magically exalted gold, or spirit of flame. And the craft of the great alchemists of old, that involved the evocation of this golden spirit of flame to transmute the quality of light in the mundane world. And indeed, some success was most definitely achieved by them, as we would instantly see if we were somehow transported back several hundred centuries to compare the natural daylight with that of today. Now this work goes on in a much more general manner. The correct use of the Great Invocation, for instance, that is a means of precipitating celestial gold into the world, of drawing the flame of spirit down to earth, redeeming and transmuting the principles of man, and through man, the conscious material essences of the lower kingdoms of nature. In this way, the light of the whole planet is increasing in quality. And so the essence of advanced metals journeys upwards through the vegetable and the animal kingdoms to become principles in the human being. And as these human principles are in turn transmuted, the golden halo that we associate with spiritual man manifests itself, demonstrating on a higher turn of the spiral similar capacities to the electrical conductivity of metallic gold. And at this point of development, the head centre, the Brahmarandra, utilises all the other centres in the body as distributing agents of vibrant electrical force. This electrical conductivity is the key to the alchemy of the future. So the reason why metals provide the key to alchemy is that they are full of movable electric charge. In other words, the negative electronic lives, well, they're always free to separate and to recombine in new relationships to accommodate the transmuted nature of the indwelling life. Metals are therefore always poised to interact electrically. And this electric alchemical potential of the metal is retained as its vibratory essence moves through the other kingdoms of nature. And it's the basis of psychological transmutation and the interactions of the human being. And even from a solely physical perspective, man is an electrical being relying on metals to communicate. The human brain consists of more than 100 billion nerve cells, and each one of those possesses around 100,000 connections. Every second, trillions of electrical signals are transmitted between neurons. That makes the internet seem fairly trivial in comparison. And it's the metals that we know as sodium and potassium, acting like batteries or pumps that regulate the electrical energy balance in every single cell membrane. Everything we see, everything we feel, that we imagine or remember, expresses itself through a world of electrical signals, all relayed and communicated to and from the central consciousness in the brain, and this through the ionic bonds that are formed by electrostatic attraction between these two metals. So when one considers that white magic is carried out in the vital airs of the brain cavity, and that a percentage of these fiery pranic currents are automatically precipitated into the body as electrical force, the degree of purification required for advanced occult work becomes apparent. As the Antakarana bridge is established and as energy pours down from the spiritual triad, the higher and the lower aspects of mind, they're fused into a creative focal point, and this at the centre of an intense magnetic field. And it's at this stage that the work of the electrical alchemist comes into play. And the tools of his trade are symbols. A higher psychometric power is employed, whereby the mind, acting like a magnet, combines the ability to attract and to repel in such a way that the potencies that lie behind the symbol can be intelligently evoked. The symbol can be brought alive through these means with colour, sound and motion, the fiery essence of the symbol blending with the atomic fires of the lower three planes, awakening into activity certain diva existences, specific lives and specific potencies that stream from them outwards, that not only have a transmuting effect on human consciousness, but an alchemizing effect on the elemental substance in which human consciousness habitually functions. Now, in connection with this, you'll probably be familiar where the Tibetan refers to some symbols in the archives, wherein instructions for disciples are contained. And they are the 6 formulas of revelation, and they're said to be inscribed upon 6 large sheets of an unknown metal. They look as if made of silver, we're told, and in reality they're composed of that metal which is the allotrope of silver, and which is therefore to silver what the diamond is to carbon. Upon these sheets are words, symbols, symbolic forms. These, when related to each other, contain the formulas which the disciple has to interpret and to integrate in his waking consciousness. And this must be done, we're told, through the medium of living processes. So the use of symbols is the means of accelerating spiritual combustion, the enlightenment of the world, by stimulating the fiery nucleus of life that resides in every form. Symbols are important tools in the work of alchemizing the essence of consciousness. So, the other thing that we have to consider about metals is that they also provide the interface between man and the world environment. An example of this is the discovery of biogenic magnetite in human brain tissue, by means of which the human central nervous system may interact with environmental magnetic fields. Current research is looking to see if magnetic material exists, specifically in the pineal gland, as it does in birds and animals, by means of which they interact with the Earth's magnetic field for navigation. The pineal gland, we know, is situated in the centre of the brain cavity, in a tiny cave, a resonant cavity. And this corresponds to a resonant cavity that exists between the surface of our planet and its ionosphere, a spherical shell that's excited by lightning strikes from the 2,000 or so thunderstorms that are taking place around the globe at any one time. Now, it's been discovered that the electromagnetic resonances produced here are of a similar frequency to the alpha and to the theta states of the human brain, and that other resonances may also exist between various layers of the Earth's electromagnetic ionosphere, between that ionosphere and the brain. Now, theta waves are roughly thought to lie in the range of 6 to 10 Hertz, alpha waves in the 8 to 12 Hertz range, and the resonant frequency of the Earth itself has been measured to be 8 Hertz, in agreement with estimates that were first made by the inventor and the electrical engineer Nikola Tesla. And the ageless wisdom teachings extend this interaction to the spiritual aura of the Earth too, teaching that through meditation, resonances can be generated in the brain cavity in sympathy with the frequencies of the inner subjective realms of the planet, and their potencies distributed in service to all living beings. Now, the ionosphere is the part of the Earth's atmosphere where the atoms that constitute it acquire a negative or a positive charge by gaining or losing electrons from the sun's radiation. And this realm consequently plays an important part, a very important part, in atmospheric electricity. The ionosphere is just a part of the vast electromagnetic medium through which intelligent electric life works, and the clue to this has been with us all the time, strangely enough, in the scientific term, in fact, that we use to describe weather and climate, and that word is meteorology. Now, the ageless wisdom teaches that a veil of magnetic meteoric dust surrounds the Earth, and it is the periodic expansion and the contraction of this meteoric veil that affects climatic change, while less meteoric dust corresponds to a cooling of the atmosphere in glacial epochs. An increase of meteoric dust, that corresponds to a heating up of the atmosphere, and hot eras such as the Carbonaceous period. Now, science actually acknowledges the fact that dust particles left by falling meteoroids can persist in the atmosphere for up to several months, and that particles might affect climate, both by scattering electromagnetic radiation and by catalysing chemical reactions in the upper atmosphere. However, the extent of meteoric influence on climate isn't as yet recognised. But it's not just the ionosphere that carries electric charge. The atoms in the ionosphere that carry the charge, they're known as a plasma. But it's not just the ionosphere that is a plasma. The whole of the universe is. Plasma, it's recognised by conventional standard astrophysics, makes up 99% of the whole universe. And plasma is generally described as a sea of charged particles, and they're called electrons and ions that react collectively to forces exerted by electric and magnetic fields. While typically described as an ionized or electrically conductive gas, plasma is also considered to be a distinct and a fundamental state of matter. Because it's often found in the form of ionized gas, it seems reasonable to speculate that this conductive medium provides an interface between the etheric levels of the physical plane and the gaseous state of matter. And it's through this mass of electrically charged particles, cosmic ideas in the form of galaxies, suns and planets, that they're enabled to make the last stage of their descent into form from the archetypal planes and into the light of day. The process is described in occult terms and symbols in the stanzas of Dazan, on which the first book of the secret doctrine, Cosmogenesis, is based. And it's continued in a treatise on cosmic fire, and it's here that the awe-inspiring beauty and the detail of the work of the celestial hierarchies that bring the manifested worlds into being, they're revealed to the intuitive mind. Through the precipitation and the diversification from one state of solidification to another, from the unknowable and the eternal, through steadily lowered vibratory rates, they work, until the precipitating idea eventually reaches that minute bandwidth of the electromagnetic spectrum that science can observe and can measure. A cosmic idea thus transits across the borderline between the esoteric, etheric realms and the exoteric gaseous realms to form the various phenomena of deep space that are recognizable to the orthodox scientists of today. A cosmic idea is electromagnetically transferred from etheric to gaseous levels through the common phenomenon of what are known as pairs of electric currents called Birkeland currents. Electric currents in space, entwining around one another to form double helixes. These Birkeland currents squeeze any matter existing between the spirals of pairs of electric force, and this causes them to undergo tremendous compression. Its constituent elements are mixed, not homogeneously, but arranged according to their electric potentials. According to plasma cosmologists, this is to be seen occurring throughout the universe, and they suggest that this is the way that chemical separation takes place in cosmic plasmas. Furthermore, it may also be the way in which suns and planets are formed. In laboratory experiments, this can also be replicated, and the matter generated within the central vortex of these spiraling currents of electricity created by electric arcing, it's pinched. The matter is pinched into zones of spherical compression, and the matter within it may be subjected to a greater or a lesser degree of melting. Now, if this process takes place on cosmic levels, which plasma cosmologists contend that it does, then its role in stellar and planetary formation becomes absolutely apparent. And of course, we know esoteric science has always advocated that electrical force underlies all building processes in the universe. And it's the second logos of the divine trinity, love wisdom, which adds to the rotary motion of all atoms his own form of motion, spiraling, periodical movement. By circulation along an orbit around a central focal point in an ever-ascending spiral, two results are brought about. Firstly, the gathering of atoms into forms, And secondly, by means of these forms, the gaining of needed contact and the development of consciousness through a gradual rarefying and a refining of the forms as the spirit of love, or the flame divine, spirals ever onwards towards the source from which it came. Out of the fusion of electric fire and fire by friction arises the spiralling periodic motion of solar fire, the ray of love wisdom that builds and sustains all forms within the solar system. Now this naturally includes the sun itself. And the standard scientific view, of course, is that the sun is a self-consuming thermonuclear engine whose light and heat are generated through nuclear fusion, the conversion of hydrogen nuclei into helium. However, this is not the case, for Helena Blavatsky writes, "The sun we see gives nothing of itself, because it is a reflection, a bundle of electromagnetic forces, one of the countless milliards of knots of Fohat. Fohat is called the thread of primeval light, the ball of thread of Ariadne. Indeed, in this labyrinth of chaotic matter, this thread runs through the 7 planes, tying itself into knots. Every plane being septenary, there are thus 49 mystical and physical forces, the larger knots forming stars, suns and systems, and the smaller forming planets, and so on. The electromagnetic knot of our sun is neither tangible nor dimensional, nor even as molecular as the electricity we know. The sun gives out nothing of itself." She continues, "It is an absurdity, therefore, to say that the solar fires are being consumed and gradually extinguished. The sun has but one distinct function. It gives the impulse to life, the impulse of life to all that breathes and lives under its light. The sun is the throbbing heart of the system, each throb being an impulse. But this heart is invisible. No astronomer will ever see it." So a growing band of plasma physicists are now recognising the fact that the electrical nature of the sun plays a fundamental part in life. And they regard the sun as part of a huge galactic circuit. And esoteric science agrees with this, but it also goes a stage further, to posit that the main source of the electrical energy of stars like our sun is in fact from the inner dimension of its hollow interior. Our current civilization has been given the most wonderful privilege of actually being allowed to look into the sun's interior through space telescopes. For sunspots are holes in the sun's photosphere where we can peer inside to the darkness that is in fact pure light. For light can only be seen when it strikes matter. Until it does so, it remains dark and invisible. The shell of the sun, its photosphere, is a veil of matter, of course, and here it is where primary electrical energy from inner space reacts via the etheric veil with a plasma, causing electrical arcing due to the current density. When we look inside the sunspots, we're viewing the darkness of primary electrical force before it's converted into the electromagnetic light, heat and mechanical motion that we traditionally associate with the sun. Now the ancient Vedic mantram, the Gayatri, calls for the unveiling of the face of the true spiritual sun. And the advent of space telescopes that extend the vision of the physical eye is a hugely important symbol that indicates the advancing spiritual status of humanity. And with this in mind, perhaps we could end now with a few moments of silent reflection on this fact. And we can reflect on the Gaia tree, followed by a short NASA video of the sunspot activity. As we do so, we can reflect on the wonderful occult truth that space is an electrical entity, and everything within it is electrical in nature and thrilling with life and consciousness. An understanding of this opens up the door for man to train in the great art and the great science of electrical alchemy, to become a conscious intermediary between the macrocosm and the microcosm. Then, to paraphrase the Tibetan, an intensification of the inner flame, coupled with the assimilated radiation of other units, will steadily increase and eventually become of such proportions that the interaction between the individualized selves will result in the merging to perfection of the flame within each one and the blending of the heat. This will proceed until the solar system becomes a fiery temple of flame with countless sparks shining within it. O Thou, who givest sustenance to the universe, from whom all things proceed, to whom all things return, unveil to us the face of the true spiritual sun, hidden by a disk of golden light, that we may know the truth and do our whole duty as we journey to thy sacred feet. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to having a discussion period with you very shortly. Thank you.
Well, Laurence, so grateful for your marvelous talk, and we have some minutes now for some questions from the audience, which I hope they're going. I think we have one immediately, before. No, Jose, I'd rather go with you, please. So stand up. Be right here so Laurence can see you, and then we'll move from here.
I am Jose Becerra from Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you very much for your talk.
Pleasure.
It found a strong resonance in me, and throughout the talk, the word emotion came clearly to mind, split into E and motion of electrons. So I wonder if you could care to further develop the thought of what's the metal to be used in the transmutation of emotion, the motion of desire in the astral plane, and its relation to maybe silver and quicksilver, mercury.
Did you get that all right?
Okay, I got the gist of it. It was breaking up just a little bit, but as I understand it, it was to talk a little bit more about motion and motion on the astral plane. Is that right? And there's something about Quicksilver
In its relationship
towards the
to
end.
emotion. Yeah.
But anyway, I could just start anyway and see if I'm addressing your question. The whole idea of motion, as we understand it at the moment, is very much in terms of physical objects and electron lives. That's how the basic electric circuit's looked upon. But as we know, we actually reverse that, because science doesn't believe in the ether, whereas we believe in the ether, and atoms, electrons, whatever you want to call them, are the opposite of what we generally think of matter. They're vortices within the etheric substance. When it comes to the astral plane, or emotion, I think you referred to it then, the same rules applies on the physical plane, that by circular, spiraling, rotary motion, guided by the will, transmutation processes occur in the body of Brahma, just as they do on the physical plane. I don't know if I'm drifting a little bit, if that's the sort of point of your question, but the transmutation of emotion is a similar thing on the astral plane. All forms of consciousness working on the astral plane will transmute the experience of the atomic lives there, and the same thing happens on the etheric levels and the physical levels here as well, through conscious experience transmuted through the power of thought. From knowledge to wisdom comes the spiraling, evolving life of Brahma, which will move upwards towards its source. I can't really, there may be somebody there who can talk more about Quicksilver. I'm not really an authority on that. The reason I would speak about any of the metals is simply what I've picked up in relation to the nature of alchemy in the past as it relates to current science, current scientific understanding.
Thank you, Laurence. We're going to ask Jose to continue that onward quest for Quicksilver. Next, Tuija, please. Yeah.
Hello, and thank you so very much. I'm Tuija Robbins from Finland. Hi, Europe. So my questions are about the forehead. What would you be saying, what is the ray makeup for the forehead as a deity? And then the second question would be about electrons. I'm so very green in this, so I understand that that the electricity flow goes from plus to minus. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll deal with that after the FOHAT
Okay.
question. But the flow of electricity generally moves, yes, toward the electron lives, move towards the positive.
So, has there any ever witnessed about that when we think that we humans, we could be considered as elementals in solar logos, and when we turn towards the path and towards the sun, we go against the stream. Can we see that also in that tiny life in electrons, that they go also against the stream?
That's a bit too much of a literal question to me, according to which direction the human being is facing. But it all has its values, particularly in ceremony and ritual, when the idea of pointing to certain geographical directions comes in, and alignment will take place with the magnetic field. To just go back to your question about Brahma, as I understand it, in FOHAT, as far as I'm aware, some of you may know different. I don't really associate any particular ray to Brahma other than maybe intelligent activity, as he's the third aspect of the Trinity. And Brahma, when he comes out to play, it's through his agent FOHAT that he does that. So you could say ultimately it was intelligent activity and then the 5 rays of attribute, perhaps, 4 rays of attribute 5.
Yes, because there seems to be the magnetic aspect as well, or activity. So I was thinking about that. Is there somewhere second ray in him, her?
Well, I mean, where do you make the boundaries with those sort of things. The whole point about the ageless wisdom is just when you think you've grasped it with the concrete mind and a new perspective comes in from a higher point, a higher frame of reference, and ultimately your concrete mind is left trying to grasp at straws again. You'll always find there's differentiation and we're moving back towards synthesis. But my argument would be at whatever level of synthesis you get to, you'll always be able to go further than that, and new rules will apply. And so, yes, you could say that there's elements of the first and the second ray in Brahma, and that all comes through from Shiva and Vishnu and whatever is contained within the Parabrahma, I suppose, and beyond.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
We have time for, oh boy, we could go on here for a while, yes. We'll make a decision here in a moment. Peter, you were next. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Peter Kabaska. I think it was in 2012, I was writing an article on Leo and Sirius. And at that point, I had a prayer asking what was the Syrian impact on the sun. Within a couple of days, the circle, that dark circle on the sun occurred. I was wondering if you had any insights on that.
There was a dark circle that appeared on the sun.
Yes,
you're not talking about sunspots.
No, a very large dark area that covered most of the sun, I'd say 70% of the sun.
And was this reported in scientific journals?
Yes, exactly, yes.
Or was it a sort of phenomena that was picked upon by other people?
Yes,
I don't recall anything being reported by NASA. Can anybody else shed light on that? Otherwise, I'm afraid I can't really help you because, as far as I know, there's never been anything, any shadow on the sun other than sunspot activity.
Yes, there are articles in most of the journals, I think. So I think it was around the November, was it? October, November of 2012.
And
I'll try
what was the explanation for these? Did you? You've read the articles.
I just asked.
What was the scientific take on them?
Oh, just that it was a phenomenon.
My view is I tend to. I am a little bit on the side of science with these sort of things. There's lots of reports. I have seen on YouTube, sort of UFOs refueling close to the sun. That sort of business, and that's not really my field of interest. I'm quite a skeptic, I'm afraid.
Yes.
I'm only interested particularly on the bridge between science and the esoteric. My interest doesn't shoot up to the highest academic sort of consideration of some of the aspects of the ageless wisdom. It's more concerned with the actual bridge between what we know now as a species and what we are going to, will be revealed to us sequentially over the next 10, 20 years. Hence the interest in electricity, because I think that the whole point of having an interest in electricity is that it is most certainly the bridge between the more abstruse teachings of the Tibetan and science, the frontiers of science as we know it, because there's a common language. A lot of the things such as astrology, telepathy, they can all be explained rationally in terms of electromagnetism. And that starts to demystify things and makes it more palatable to the average person, I think. And that's got to be a good thing.
I'll try and send the material.
Okay.
Okay, Finley, one more, I think. Yeah, I got Alana.
Hi, my name's Finley. I was just interested in your description of the sun and wondering if you could relate that to what VK says about the objective sun being in the shape of a heart with 7 ventricles through which the 7 ray energies pass into our system.
In the spirit of, yes, the bridge that we're trying to create, certainly the sun isn't a perfect sphere, and energy pours in at the north pole of the sun. What the electric universe advocates would say is the sun is, if you like, a homopolar or Faraday motor, and it's by the electrical energy that's pouring into the pole that causes the rotatory effect. And the ventricles on the sun would be seen certainly in the same way that Babbitt's picture of the electron is portrayed in Cosmic Fire, and the way that the rays are actually emitted from the sun. I couldn't really comment on that, but it's very much true that it's as above, so below. So how the rays are concentrated in the sun and come through, I couldn't really do anything other than hazard a guess. But the interesting thing for me is that we have now got the opportunity to actually look through the photosphere of the sun and to see the darkness there. That's counter space, and that's where the energies of the rays are likely to be coming out and pulsating through the photosphere, where they are contacting matter and creating a plasma. That will be differentiated into various electron streams and into the solar wind. And one would imagine that the solar wind is a physical counterpart of the seven rays in some way, and there's no reason why the rays on a higher level of subtlety would follow similar courses, perhaps.
Great, thank you. Ayla.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. This is a question about the invocative power of esoteric groups, especially if they are in the formation, heart to heart, mind to mind, Ajna to Ajna, spirit to spirit. Say there are mass groupings in Australasia, the Americas, and Europe, and there were three toruses virtually vibrating and creating a unified field even between them. Could that have the effect of merging of the three types of electricity to take the next step? You know how the avatar synthesis is calling for the unified work of all the world groups. So I'm looking at the electromagnetic fields coming together, and what is the byproduct of that? Invocative field.
So the electromagnetic fields of, sorry, which bodies again? Which three electromagnetic fields?
Okay. In our yoga synthesis meditation process, there is a use of the linking of the causal bodies of all involved in different, say, think of three globes. Those globes represent the unified fields of Australasia, for instance, Americas, and Europe. And then they work in unison to tune into each other as well in order to invoke in a greater scale. That's all. Sort of makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is, of course, an electromagnetic field, an etheric body to every form, and there will be so to continents as there are to nations, worlds, and spheres. And by creating resonance between the various continents, the soul of the nations, the soul of the continents, then certain effects will certainly be produced that will tend towards synthesis. I don't have high hopes that things are going to be happening all that quickly and rapidly. I think it depends a lot on human consciousness and the reflection that we see in international affairs. But all the things that we see in international affairs, if we look behind what's actually happening in the consciousness of a race and on various continents and that, where there's synthesis of thought, international agreements and that, then we can understand from that that the subtle counterpart is also happening and that there's a resonance taking place that is leading to a spiral upwards. On the other hand, just to talk about the electromagnetic field of a block of land, rather than the people involved in it, the deva activity and that, I don't necessarily see anything happening just physically of its own that's going to lead to some kind of major advance in synthesis.
Thank you, Laurence. One more question and I'll wrap up.
Hi, this is Alana. I recently saw an amazing film called Particle Fever, about a couple years documenting 10,000 scientists around the world focusing on an experiment at the particle accelerator in CERN, Switzerland. They were investigating the atomic weight of the so-called Higgs boson particle, sometimes called the God particle. Did that experiment, does it relate to the bridge that you're envisioning and understanding?
The Higgs boson particle is a very interesting topic for consideration because I don't believe it exists. And you do have to choose between the two. It's okay to have your Higgs boson particle, but that is what gives mass to everything else. And it brings in the whole concept of gravity, which in actual fact the electrical advocates would look upon gravity as an electrical force. We know that gravity is in actual fact the involutionary pull of the spiritual entity of any planet. There's lots of different ways you could look at it. But the whole thing about particle accelerators is that they're destined and doomed to find as many particles as they search for, is my belief. Also, if we consider the fact that a white magician can precipitate matter into the universe out of the invisible realms and change the amount of matter in the universe at any one time, that immediately undermines certain rules of physics. If you've got 1,000 or so top physicists in the world, all with very focused, trained minds, searching for a very small little particle that can't be seen, other than by the traces of its movement, then I think the mass effect of those thinking scientists is going to produce the results that they're looking for.
Hello, Laurence. This is Olivia Hansen, and thank you so very much. This has just been wonderful. Our whole audience
Thank you.
it's just been terrific. So I did also want you to invite you to say something about the Electric Bridge site on the Lucis Trust website, where you have more articles and this conversation is going on, so that our wonderful audience here will know about how we can continue on in this conversation.
Okay. Were you asking me, sorry, to talk a little bit about the electric bridge? Is that what you're saying? Yes?
Well, I guess I was just saying, I was acknowledging it. So I guess maybe if they just know about it, to go to the Lucis Trust website, and you have a special section on the electric bridge. Right?
Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Well, Laurence, we had a request that, given the I want to say the power of your presentation, the impact on all of us, that if you would stay with us one more minute, we will just kind of close with a quiet meditation, just to soak on this and give you thanks through the ethers.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Beautiful energy over there.
Thank you so much, Laurence. This is Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Laurence. It was wonderful. We have a lot to study. Thank you so much. It's been beautiful to have you with us.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Have a wonderful rest of your conference.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.